Paul Manafort's prison sentence is nearly doubled to 7 years. The New York Times. Washington. A federal judge on Wednesday nearly doubled the prison sentence of President Trump's former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, to 7.5 years, denouncing him as a man who spent a significant portion of his career gaming the system. Minutes later, the Manhattan District Attorney, including mortgage fraud, that could ensure that Mr. Manafort remains behind bars even if the president decides as he has to pardon Mr. Manafort for his crimes. Convictions for the proceedings amounted to a wrenching defeat for Mr. Manafort, 69, who came to his sentencing in a wheelchair because of gout and pleading for probation so he could spend his final years with his wife. Judge Amy Berman Jackson of United States District Court in Washington expressed scant sympathy for his plight. Rather, she said that Mr. Manafort had used his many talents as a strategist to evade taxes, deceive banks, subvert lobbying laws and obstruct justice. Also he could sustain an ostentatiously opulent lifestyle with more houses than a family can enjoy, more suits than one man can wear. Ever since his initial bail hearing, she said, he had misled her and the prosecutors, part of what she called his determined efforts to obscure the facts. Even on his sentence, the defendant is not public enemy number one, but he is also not a victim either, Judge Jackson said. She stopped short of giving Mr. Manafort the maximum 10-year term that she could have imposed, adding 3.5 years to the nearly 4-year term Mr. Manafort in a related prosecution in Alexandria, Virginia. Explaining why her attitude stood in stark contrast to that of Judge T.S. Ellis III of United States District Court in Northern Virginia, who said last week that Mr. Manafort had led an otherwise blameless life for 8 felonies, a punishment that some legal experts described as startlingly low. In an apparent reference to, Judge Jackson noted that she was bound strictly by the case in front of her. What is happening but she said the scale of Mr. Manafort's crimes was remarkable. It is hard to outside the courthouse, Mr. Manafort's lead lawyer, Kevin Downing, described Judge Jackson's decision as such a callous, harsh sentence that is totally unnecessary. Mr. Downing, Mr. Manafort's defense lawyers had repeatedly suggested that their client would be a free man had he not worked for the Trump campaign for 5 months in 2016, implying that Mr. Mueller's investigators pursued him for crimes unrelated to the campaign only because they hoped to use him as a stepping stone in the Russia inquiry. Judge Jackson firmly dismissed that argument, noting that investigators often find evidence of unrelated crimes during inquiries, and that the perpetrators uncovered that way do not get a pass. She said the judge accused Mr. Manafort of a sleight of hand throughout the criminal proceeding against him, including wrongly inflating his assets in a bail hearing and exaggerating the harshness of his conditions in jail. She suggested, was he spinning the facts beforehand to get a good deal, or was he spinning them afterwards to protect others? She asked. We don't know. 6 Trump advisors or officials have been charged by the special counsel. Even Mr. Manafort's apology for his crimes rang somewhat hollow, she said, because it appeared to be prompted by Judge Ellis' criticism that he did not seem sufficiently contrite during last week's sentencing. Each of the conspiracy charges considered at Wednesday's hearing carried a maximum prison term of 5 years. But because she sentenced him to 13 months on the second conspiracy charge, which involved obstruction of justice, saying his efforts to influence the testimony of witnesses had largely come to naught because the witnesses had rebuffed him. In requesting probation, Mr. Manafort noted that he would turn 70 in 2 weeks and had already been stripped of his wealth. Please let my wife. Much of the hearing in Washington focused on Mr. Manafort's violations of the law requiring foreign lobbyists to disclose their activities in the United States. Probably because the other charges had been aired at length in the Virginia case. Andrew Weissman, the lead prosecutor, said Mr. Manafort and others, at his behest, secretly lobbied for the government of Viktor F. Yanukovych, the pro-Russian president who led Ukraine from 2010 to 2014. Former European This deliberate effort to obscure the facts undermines our political discourse, Judge Jackson said. Judge Jackson tends to be relatively lenient on convicted criminals who appear before her. In the 5 years, but she also has gone out of her way to make clear that being well-connected earns no chits in her court. She knows who committed. The prospect that Mr. Trump could pardon Mr. Manafort has hung over the proceedings for many months. Late last year, asked again after Wednesday's sentencing, Mr. Trump said, "I have not even given it a thought, as of this moment. It's not something," he said again that the special counsel's investigation was a hoax. In remarks that in fact, Judge Jackson and Judge Ellis simply noted that the evidence against Mr. Manafort was not related to Russia's election meddling. The new charges filed in New York, in an indictment secured by the Manhattan District Attorney, Cyrus R. Vance Jr., were apparently meant to ensure that Mr. Manafort would be punished even if he was pardoned. They were rooted in the "no one is beyond the law in New York," Mr. Vance said. He said while a spokesman for Mr. Manafort said he had no comment, some legal experts predicted that Mr. Manafort would challenge the new charges on the grounds of double jeopardy.
Raindrop, drop top smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park pot.